Hi, I'm Zetetic. Spoilers for Fire Emblem Three Houses abound. Have you ever wondered what would happen if everyone in Fire Emblem Three Houses got 2 turns per turn? Well, I didn't. Until I played Thracia Overclocked, a patch for Fire Emblem Thracia 776 by Myasis. This uses the game's natural action star mechanic and just makes it so that a second action triggers 100% of the time. Very clever. After playing a few chapters of this, a thought popped into what remained of my brain. Don't other Fire Emblem games let units take 2 turns sometimes? Like, sure, there's dancers, but how about other things? Oh yeah, the final boss of the Azure Moon route of 3 houses, Hegemon Edelgard. The Twin Crests skill allows its user to act twice per turn. In the base game, only one enemy has this skill, but with a little program called Fodlan Editor, by Ghost Slayer, with help from the Fire Emblem 3 Houses research team, I can give the Twin Crests skill to every class in the game. From there, it's only a matter of learning to mod 3 houses, and praying that the game actually loads. With all of that out of the way, let's actually start. I'm playing on maddening difficulty in classic mode. This is a challenge playthrough after all. As for which form I choose, I go with this one, because I want to recruit Sylvain early and make Byleth a Pegasus Knight. Since this run is very 2-themed, I named Byleth Byleth. Her birthday is 2-2, because that's the same day in the US and in civilized places. With that, we're thrust into our first battle. Gerald's going to sit back while letting the kids do all the work. On that note, I want Claude to do most of the heavy lifting here. I'm going with the Golden Deer route, partly because it was my very first route in this game, and partly because it's tied with the Blue Lions for the longest. If I'm going to challenge myself, I may as well do 22 chapters, right? So I want Claude and Byleth to get a bunch of experience, and maybe even level up once. After taking my time to move up all of my units and get their talk conversations out of the way, I have to move up without pulling the enemies on the right side. Like the base game Prologue, the best plan here is to move into the woods. It's worth noting here that enemies with Twin Crests can't attack the same unit twice in one turn. Well, usually that's true, but I'll get into the exception when it becomes relevant. I do have to be wary of Claude getting attacked when the enemies get their second turn, so I position Dimitri, Byleth, and Edelgard in such a way that the enemies can't get around them easily. Let me get the awkward thing about this challenge out of the way. Twin Crests doesn't always work. It's pretty rare, but sometimes when a unit takes an action, they will not get a second one. And this will usually happen to every other unit you move afterward for the rest of the turn. And this usually happens about once per chapter. Funnily enough, this never seems to happen to the enemies. So it's mainly just something I have to account for. This forces me to have Dimitri kill one of the enemies, but I think I'll manage without the extra experience. After taking a turn to drink vulneraries, I position Dimitri in the woods to the right of Byleth, and back Edelgard and Claude off, well out of range. The effect here is that the enemies on the right side push in to hit Dimitri, then they will use their second turn to attack Byleth and die. With all the enemies dead save for Costas' little group, Geralt finally starts to move, as expected. I do want Geralt and Costas to fight, and for Costas to take almost all the damage he can from Geralt, but sadly Geralt misses him on the enemy phase, and on the ally phase, Geralt prefers to attack one of Costas' goons. So I back up and form a line by the village gate. This lets Costas move in further, attack Geralt and Byleth to get knocked down to 3 HP, and then Geralt gets him down to 1 HP since he is prevented from killing Costas. Next, I just have Claude confiscate Edelgard and Dimitri's weapons, and then Byleth finishes off Costas and gets a level up I'm pretty pleased with. After the battle, Alois basically kidnaps Geralt and Byleth and brings them to Garreg Mach. After meeting Rhea and Sedith and all the other pleasant people in the monastery, Rhea gives Byleth her first quest: to feign interest in all the students. Once that's all done, I make my house choice official and get the blood test. It's mandated for all the teachers or something. I really wasn't paying attention during orientation. Anyway, as a side note, I'll be playing with DLC active, but I won't be taking these items. They're just too good, really, and it would feel like cheating for this particular video. So I just do all the starting quests that introduce you to the dining hall, the greenhouse, and fishing, and then it's time to jump into the first mock battle. Since I can only bring 5 units, my strategy is to only bring the units that know either Tempest Lance or Curve Shot. Being able to use magic isn't really important for this battle in my opinion. I really just need high accuracy. So that means I'm bringing Lawrence, Leone, Ignatz, and of course Claude and Byleth. I also want the majority of vulneraries in Claude or Byleth's inventory since I don't want one of my other students to go down and have everyone get locked out of healing. For my first turn, I want to position my units so that Ferdinand von Aegir can only attack someone standing in a forest, and Hubert can only attack once. Unfortunately, this does put us in a bit of a precarious position, Byleth is at 4 HP, and Ferdinand is now in a forest tile himself. So I have Claude curve shot Hubert a couple of times, while Ignatz works on chipping Ferdinand down with his hit plus 20 personal skill. That puts Leonie in a good spot to knock Ferdinand out, and Lawrence can do the same for Hubert. In the second enemy phase, I get very lucky with Ash double missing Lawrence, and then Ash decides to attack Claude for some reason. I just let Lawrence and Byleth beat up Ash so we can move on. Now I want to get to Dorothea and Edelgard without walking into their range. To do that, I start to position my units for some curved shots over the fence. Incidentally, I'll tip my hand a bit here and say that this challenge was originally going to give only the enemies twin crests. But it's basically impossible to defeat Hubert, and if you play Black Eagles to try and avoid facing him, you'll just get picked off by Lawrence and Ignatz instead. But if you cheat and just beat them anyway, the game has a high chance of freezing when only Manuela is left on the Golden Deer side, so that's neat. Anyway, once my units are in position for some curved shots, I start by hitting Dorothea with Ignatz. I put him on a tile that Dorothea can reach within 2 moves, hoping I'll be able to move Ignatz away, but alas, he decides he doesn't need a second turn after all. After Claude misses a couple of times, Dorothea nearly kills Ignatz, and Edelgard is not far behind. This is actually a pretty good position though. It gives me the opportunity to chip him down with curve shot before moving in with some up close and personal attacks. Once I have a chance to move my units up, it's actually pretty easy to take down Manuela. 2 curved shots from Claude plus another 2 from Ignatz is exactly enough to bring Manuela down to 0 HP from her maximum. With Manuela down, the remainder of the blue lions are next. I position Byleth on the heal tile, expecting that only Mercedes will be able to attack this turn, and only attack Byleth at that. Unfortunately, to survive this mock battle, I need to sacrifice someone. Lawrence, go into this definitely safe location and beat up Mercedes for me, please. Dimitri takes the bait, finishes Lawrence off, and Dedue gets baited into overextending by attacking Byleth and Ignatz. Importantly, if Dedue waited on the first of his 2 turns, he would have gotten +4 defense from his personal skill, even when attacking the second time. Not that Ignatz can counter, but keep in mind that this happens for skills that trigger on waiting, like Alert Stance. Sadly, the 1-turn glitch occurs as my units pile on Dedue, but all 4 units working together can take him out. Byleth gets a second turn for some reason, so I put her back on the heal tile. Dimitri attacks her, then goes for Leonie, who he would have KO'd if not for a lucky dodge. Dimitri goes down with 2 shots from Claude and 1 from Ignatz, who levels up and gets strength, which I really need on him. Hanneman nearly goes down to the curve shot duo, which baits him into moving and allows Leonie to take him out. She levels up, and that's Chapter 1 in 15 turns. Time for Chapter 2. Claude is not very happy about early game Fire Emblem enemies. For the Monastery portion of Chapter 2, you're forced to select a different action for each week. For week 1, I have to explore. Whenever I explore in this part of the run, I'm basically just doing all the fetch quests, checking on the greenhouse, planting new things, cooking with units I want to eventually recruit to make Immortality Stew, which gives +1 defense when I have the fish for it, dining with students to get their motivation and support points up, and fishing on occasions when I just need a fish. Sylvain is easy to recruit. Simply bump into him, say Ada Ada, and he immediately becomes obsessed with you. Sylvain is being recruited because he eventually learns Swift Strikes, which is one of the best combat arts in the game. He also gives easy access to the Lance of Ruin in a few chapters. Before I forget, I also want to start setting goals and explain how I'll be training people, at least for the early game. Claude is set to Bows and Authority. He doesn't really need any immediate training, but I would like him to take advantage of his high charm with battalions, as well as eventually learn Encloser for one of the stronger crowd control abilities in a game where enemies are going to be moving twice. Lawrence is set to Axes and Heavy Armor in an effort to get him to be a big Pavise tank, so he doesn't die in a certain well-designed map 11 chapters from now. Raphael and Ignatz are focusing on Authority for Rally Strength and Rally Speed, respectively. Lysithea needs to start working on getting Heal, so Faith. Marianne is also focusing on Faith for Physic. Hilda is focusing on Reason and Riding because I want her to be my dancer for this playthrough. Reason gets her Bolting, which is very good for keeping enemies in range for linked attacks, and Riding will eventually get her Movement +1. Leonie just needs Axes and Bows so that she can class into Brigand and Archer for Death Blow and hit +20 later, and Sylvain is doing Lances and Axes. For group tasks, I want Lawrence and Raphael to focus on Weeding to get their Heavy Armor rank up. I don't know why Weeding helps with Heavy Armor, but I'm not going to think about it too hard. If people misgender you, they're wrong. Pay them no mind. And Ignatz gets Rally Speed, so I set his goals to Sword and Bow, preparing him for his future life as an assassin. For the second week, we're forced to do an auxiliary battle. Auxiliary battles all kind of play out the same way, so I won't delve into them too much. But basically I want to use auxiliary battles to shore up weapon ranks that units will need for future class changes, and desirable combat arts. For this particular battle, I also want to avoid my battalions taking too much damage, since they can't be repaired until Chapter 3 for some reason. Is it just me, or is the loading screen dog gigantic? During the next instruction, I get Curve Shot on Leone, and since Raphael got Rally Strength during the battle, I set his goals to Axes and Heavy Armor. Lysithea got Heal, so I can set her goals to Reason and Faith, for Dark Spike's Tau and Warp, respectively. And for the only seminar I'll do in the entire game, I choose Seteth's, to get some extra authority rank on my students. And now for the first real battle.
So, we are taking children into battle, are we?
Chapter 2 of this challenge introduces archers and thieves. Archers have Poison Strike thanks to Maddening, but with Twin Crests they can now effectively move 10 tiles in one enemy phase. Since they have 2-3 range, they can threaten a unit that's 13 tiles away from their starting position. And thieves normally have Pass, but with Twin Crests, if they attack someone on their first turn, they are definitely going to attack someone in the back line on their second. So basically, my units are going to get shot a lot and get attacked from behind a lot, unless I play my cards right. For the battle preps, I just want to buy a few lances and bows for people so I can spam Tempest's Lance and hit enemies from a distance. I also give Byleth Acero's Mercenaries for the slight bonus to her hit rate since she'll be training lances. My opening moves are always going to be the most important, so for this battle I want Byleth to successfully hit 2 of the first 3 enemies with Onslaught. Onslaught has a 40% chance to hit, so I just save Scum for this, it's just turn 1 anyway. 4 attempts later, and Onslaught finally hits. That gives me some breathing room to ensure the archer doesn't move, and I just have Leone kill the other enemies. Just to visualize how far enemies can move, they can go from the north side of the main plateau to my unit's starting bridge in one phase. But actually I want this to happen. The next turn is kinda like a sliding tile puzzle. I need to move my units in a way that leaves no one undefended and no enemy on the bridge alive, but I also need to clear a space for Marianne to heal Sylvain so that she can gain Physic. It takes me a minute, but I figure out a good combination of Tempest Lance and Curve Shot spam that does the trick. The enemies to the northeast are starting to move now, so in response, I pull my units back and put Byleth in front, with Sylvain holding a leather shield. My goal is to make the thieves waste their first turn moving towards me, and spend the second turn attacking so I don't have to deal with Pass. This works out very well, but the constant barrage of enemies does mean we have to constantly kill everyone that is close by in order to deal with the next group a turn later. And that next turn is a bit tricky because I want to get rid of the charging enemies without taking too much damage from the fighters to the left. Fortunately, I'm able to Curve Shot and Miasma most of their HP away, but I do need to step into range with Byleth and Sylvain to finish them off. Also, I need Lawrence to stand here unarmed like the exquisite goofball that he is so that he doesn't get doubled, but also prevents the fighters from moving past him and attacking my squishier units. It kind of works out. I mean, Byleth gets hit by Onslaught and gets rattled, but at least nobody died. Now we have all the room we need to just gang up on these guys. After spending a turn positioning my units, I use Byleth to run interference on the enemy on the left so I can grab that large bullion with Lysithea, and then kill the enemy with Claude. I'm not going to go left though, I just want my units to head up the bridge so we can kill Costas more quickly and deal with fewer enemies. So I get in position within a few turns and rally Leone's strength so that she can deal with the archer lurking under the bridge. She shoots him and then closes in with a Tempest Lance. Now I just need to pull in an annoying thief and kill him real quick. Next, I back up all of my units except for Byleth, who lurks in the forest to bait in Costas. Once I have him right where I want him, it's time for the Golden Deer dog pile. Claude starts us off, followed by Leone, and then Ignatz, and then the one-turn glitch. I'll just have to go with Byleth. And it only took 18 turns, wow. On to Chapter 3. After being paid a US public school teacher's salary, we're instantly given a task that is well outside our job description. Killing Lonato. Least evil Rhea quote. For some reason, the mod that I made for this challenge also lets female characters promote into some of the enemy and NPC only classes. I'm gonna avoid doing this though and just make Byleth a Myrmidon. Immediately upon exploring the monastery, I go down into Abyss. For now, I just want to recruit Balthus. He's gonna be one of the main members of the 15-person team I'm trying to build. He's kinda like Raphael but better, really, and his initial training will reflect that. I want Claude to get C authority so he can equip a Blaze Battalion, Lysithea to D authority so she can use a Magic Battalion, and Marianne needs to train Reason because I would like her to have Thoron soon. I also want Byleth to start practicing her flying skill because I want her to be ready to be a Pegasus Knight as soon as she's level 10. Aside from all of that, monastery time is pretty typical. On the final week before the mission, I deploy for roster retrieval, which is a DLC quests battle from Constance. The battle itself just plays out like a typical auxiliary battle, but the Owl Feather and 800 Renown are pretty useful. I also apparently get hints on lost items and tea time answers, but I literally never use those. Before the main battle, Catherine shows us the Thunderbrand pictures in her wallet. To prepare for the only Fog of War map in the main story, I make sure Claude has a torch. I also want Balthus to have more weapons, since he's getting deployed instead of Hilda. I start off by having Claude pop a torch use. Raphael rallies Byleth's strength so that she can hit the first enemy in front of Catherine, then rallies Balthus so he can curve shot the enemy to death. I want to get rid of the enemies closer to Catherine in the hopes that she might help me with more distant enemies more quickly. During the first enemy phase, a human wave of enemies comes crashing down on my units that can take a hit, and Sylvain and Balthus both get rattled by gambits. At this point, everyone has a battalion. Most people have some sort of offensive battalion, but Marianne has the healing one, and Lawrence has the Stride battalion. Stride is very exquisite in this run because the +5 movement bonus is basically doubled, so I can have Byleth and Lysithea team up on one of the enemies in the forest. I also have to eliminate some of the other units, or at least stop them from moving, otherwise I'm going to get massacred on the next turn. As enemies get a lot tankier from this chapter on, gambits are used a lot to just manage crowds. Even if I can only hit one enemy with them, that still stops 2 attacks on enemy phase. I try to use Rushing Blow with Balthus to block off her rattled Myrmidon, in the hopes that Catherine will attack the rattled archer and save me some time, but instead she just does this. Thank you, Catherine. Very cool. I still have Marianne heal the green units. I have no expectations that they'll survive, but the more hits they soak up for me, the better. Balthus's King of Grappling personal skill, which gives him +6 strength and defense when his HP is under 50%, is super useful here. It's a little too dangerous to keep him at low health for very long, but it's almost always to my advantage to get an attack in with him before I heal him up. After the nearby enemies are removed, I move up in a standard Ball of Death formation while Catherine goes hunting for the Fog Machine. I get rid of the local yokels and back my squishy units up, then let Catherine just take the brunt of the enemy attacks, while Byleth finishes off anyone who gets close. Since Catherine injured the mage, it's pretty easy for Byleth to step in and finish up.
It was your wretched zealotry that killed my son!
Cool anime cutscene. With the fog gone, we can move up a bit more now. Catherine actually becomes a lot more helpful, and the battle becomes a cinch. Move up, kill enemies, move up more, kill more enemies. Watch Catherine do her thing. The only thing Catherine can't do is kill Lenato. So Lysithea chips him down with Miasma, Byleth goes in with the Steel Sword Wrath Strike, and Sylvain finishes him off with the Night Kneeler combat art. And all in 10 turns. Now for Chapter 4. Byleth's almost level 10 and needs a lot more Lance experience before she can qualify for Pegasus Knight, so giving her the Soldier test will help. It's a 66% chance, but she gets it on the first try, so that's nice. I also want to make most of my units fighters as soon as possible. I can now take the Anna quest that gives stat boosters in exchange for taking trade secrets and auxiliary battles. It's a nice quest, but it's not something I really focus on doing. Monastery time is a lot more valuable, and I don't actually do any auxiliary battles in this chapter anyway. I do some of the other monastery quests though, like the required investigation, and giving the elegant tea set to Lawrence. You also get access to the arena. Balthus is really good for this because his personal skill has an effect here, so if you just don't heal him, he easily wins the last couple of battles, and we can get a Steel Sword Plus out of it. I try to use any activity points and gifts I can spare on wooing Catherine. I fall just a bit short of hitting the C+ support so that she'll accept the level 9 Byleth's recruitment offer, but that's okay because I don't need her until the next chapter anyway. I also want to get my Lance rank up through faculty training. Now that I have access to tea parties, I want to do them whenever someone has a birthday, because of the potential for getting +1 charm on Byleth and her fellow tea drinker. It's basically a free stat booster for making gambits a bit more useful. As the battle's about to begin, I basically just want to refresh all of my units' gear. I can't repair anything yet, so I just dump my broken weapons in the inventory and buy fresh ones. At the end of buying my students' school supplies, I have 9 gold coins. Wow. At the very beginning of the chapter, we're threatened by 2 dangerous enemies that are somewhat protected by enemies to the far left and far right of the map. I do want to send all of my units to the left eventually, but at the start, I want to hang out close to the starting position, for the most part. Byleth is going right so that she can pull some of the nearby enemies there, but I need a strength rallied Balthus to take out the mage with 2 curved shots. The archer, however, is a bit tricky. I need to back my units up and make sure the archer doesn't double anyone. The first turn goes well, mostly because Marianne is able to pull the archer into overextending. Now I just need to start getting rid of the enemies. Balthus takes care of the archer from the right side of the map, while the other units are easily able to gang up on the archer that charged in. Now I just need to give the enemies charging down the center of the map a wall to crash into. These guys are easy to kill on the next turn, which is great for some of my underleveled units like Claude and Raphael. With the initial enemies out of the way, I can start to move left. I move all of my units this way because I don't want anyone to be trapped between the enemies that are ahead of me and the ones that will come in as reinforcements on turn 7. Also, I want to get the spirit dust in the left chests and don't really care about the intermediate seal, which is in the chest on the right. The problem is that the enemies up ahead are quite fast, so I need to approach with units that either have high attack speed or can easily take 2 hits. This strategy works pretty well in enemy phase, but because I couldn't kill one of the enemies, the monk swoops down and double heals his friend. The right amount of Tempest Lance and Miasma spam fixes that right up though. The real challenge is getting through the Dark Mages up ahead. Fortunately, Byleth and Leone have enough HP and resistance to soak their attacks, but it seriously makes me wish I could afford Pure Water. At this point, I can relax somewhat and feed my weaker units some kills while advancing. There are enemies with battalions up ahead, but there's nothing to be done. I just don't want to end up in the Death Knight's range. On turn 7, as expected, the reinforcements arrive and do their synchronized greeting of offering everyone a hug. I plan to move ahead and ignore them for as long as I can. As I have Byleth charge, I put the rest of the students in position for a next turn stride. This enables most of them to plow through the remaining enemies ahead and position themselves very close to the boss, but I kinda forgot about unlocking the chest. No worries, first I have Lauren stride Claude and Leone. Isithia grabs a chest key from Balthus, gives it to Byleth, and then heals Sylvain. Balthus curve shots the mysterious boss. Byleth backtracks to give the key to Leone, who then backtracks some more to unlock the chest. And then Sylvain moves in to Tempest Lance the boss.
Whoops.
Byleth steals the Sword of the Creator, and this chapter is complete in 9 turns. Oh boy, Chapter 5, my favorite chapter in the game. Rhea orders the mass execution of everyone I spared in Chapter 4, then I grab some tea. After that, I use the statue feature to get as many divine pulses as I can, because Sothis knows I'm going to need them. As an aside, the only thing I use Renown for in this run is fixing the statues. I don't do anything with the altar and abyss or anything like that. I also give Ignatz and Marianne some confidence herbs and hopeful herbs. Kinda suspicious, but gotta make money somehow, I guess. I also get some flying training with Manuela because I really need it now. As far as instruction goes, my main focus is on getting the kids ready for their intermediate classes. Almost everyone wants to go into Archer for hit plus 20, and Brigand, but Sylvain and Leone need riding training eventually, and Marianne and Lysithia will be focusing entirely on magic. On the second week, Byleth passes the Pegasus Knight test with a 74% chance, and I boil Ignatz for a quest. I also give Catherine so many sunflowers to eat that she's convinced to join my team. She's going to be deployed to the next mission to make it slightly more bearable, but for now I want her to beat up children in the arena for a free intermediate seal. I go into battle for the third week to delete some bandits and convince some merchants to come to the monastery to sell me fishing bait. As I delve into the battle, I need to mention that I bought new weapons, replenished my battalions, and bankrupted myself again, oopsie daisy. Now that I can deploy an adjutant, I decide to pair Hilda with Claude. This will let her gain some levels, and their linked attacks give each other extra might, so that seems like a no-brainer. To get Catherine in, I have to leave Lawrence behind and give the Stride Battalion to Raphael. My first attempt at this map relies heavily on the fact that completing Maddening partly requires rote memorization of where enemies will ambush spawn and what they will be able to do. By extension, the Twin Crests mod makes the player account for 2 ambush spawn moves instead of just 1. So, in order to send Gilbert back home before he screws everything up, I form a decent wall behind my group of units to trap the enemies into mostly attacking Gilbert. On the ally phase, Gilbert decides to try his luck against a mage, and gets what he deserves. After grabbing the Armor Slayer, I have to figure out a way to handle the next group of ambush reinforcements. I feel like the next set of reinforcements are the worst in the game, and it's probably what makes players most often decide that maddening isn't really worth their time. And now I have to deal with them attacking twice. Yay. Fortunately, with the power of hindsight, I know that they'll only appear once my units pass this random pillar, so I can take my time to group my units together so that Raphael can give them a good old stride, and charge them all into the next group of enemies, which will then put them out of range of reinforcements. Unfortunately, it takes all of my divine pulses to figure out what exact combination of moves is going to work best for everyone to get through this alive without getting killed by the enemies ahead or were the enemies behind? By managing attack speed and baiting enemies into attacking Marianne and Lysithea while insulating Raphael, it eventually gets to a point where it's manageable. Unfortunately, when I actually need a pulse a little later on, I don't have one anymore, and so I see the game over screen, so that's great. On attempt number 2, I have a very interesting idea. If I can save Old Stupid from the ambushers, he'll walk into enemy range while yelling some nonsense about the goddess, which should get almost everyone to charge at us. That way, we don't have to even go into the ambush spawn area, at least in theory. It all hinges on the team's ability to form a defensive line, which is itself its own feat. Although Claude's positioning in the Armor Slayer chest room is less than optimal, he serves as good bait for our other units to attack enemies from 2 sides. Byleth can more or less handle her own, although that relies on some lucky dodges. Of course, things don't always work out, because it's always hard to protect squishy units from a dozen enemy attacks. Fortunately, aside from just killing the enemies to death, we have Gambits to stop them from moving for a turn, and give everyone some room to breathe. Fortunately, Lysithea with her C+ Faith rank has been using Nosferatu and Heal for basically every turn with combat in it. Once all of the charging enemies are dead, I spend a couple more turns healing until she gets Warp. Now it's time to warp Byleth over to Miklon, but first I should rally Byleth's strength, though, when the game crashed. Well, I didn't strategize around that one. My third attempt plays out basically like my first one, except I don't die. So let's just skip to the point where Sylvain commits fratricide for the meme, and Miklon gets consumed by the unknowable atrocity of Cthulhu. With the power of friendship and battalions, we're able to take out the beast's defenses on the first turn, and then all of the units just dogpile him until he dies. It took 18 turns and a portion of my soul. Byleth skillfully negotiates with Rhea to keep the Lance of Ruin for herself, but oh no, Flayn has been kidnapped. Oh, jeez.
Looks like Teach just got tenure.
Although now we have Detective added to our already ridiculous list of responsibilities. In Chapter 6, everyone's looking for Flayn except Shamir, who has been on her half-hour lunch break for 52 minutes. I want her on my team, but it's going to be just a little while longer. I'm able to start getting my units promoted to intermediate classes and go into auxiliary battles to get my units some levels. I'm not going to be using Catherine for much longer, so I want her to train heavy armor to prepare her to be a guard adjutant for Shamir. I wine and dine Shamir enough so that by the final week I'm able to convince her to join my team. After cooking Immortality Stew with Felix for pretty much the entire game, and tossing him a few gifts, I also finally asked him to join. I waited until he had the required level and skill in Brawling to class change to, well, Brawler. He's just going to be a guard adjutant for Sylvain for 0 investment. Oh yeah, Flayn. Manuela has been comatose in this room for a month, but she shouldn't suffer too much brain damage as long as we can get her to the infirmary quickly to see wait. My face when I do not get the white dragon scarf, which I definitely really wanted. Definitely. Since Claude isn't available for this battle, I'm bringing along Shamir, because I like having long-range attacks and a map with a lot of doorways and twists and turns. I'm also pairing Felix with Sylvain. Sylvain's a little on the slow side, so having Felix guard him from taking too much damage from second attacks is nice. Aside from all of the usual preps, I make sure to bring along a Pure Water. My plan is to send 5 of my units down the right-hand path to use the lever and grab the Levin sword and the March Ring, while my other 5 units work on the left side. I put Marianne in this alcove here to bait in an archer without blocking Byleth and Balthus' enemy phase combat. Besides that, the action on the left side is pretty straightforward. The right side is a lot trickier because if the one turn glitch happens on any of my units, like it does with Lysithea here, they're in danger of getting shot a lot. Usually it's fixable on the next turn as long as my units don't get doubled to death while stuck in the hallway. The Pure Water I got is for this row on the left where I want Sylvain to tank a mix of physical and magical attacks with Byleth. But because enemies are incredibly bad at coordinating their movement, we don't take that many attacks at all. On the next turn, the right team is able to open the door to the lever room. Remember way back in the beginning when I said enemies don't attack the same unit twice, with one exception that I would get into when it's relevant? Well, it's relevant now. Enemies with Canto do not abide by this rule, but only if they actually have remaining movement after their first attack. So if they're able to attack and then move on their first turn, they will usually attack the same unit on their second turn. The implications of this are deadly. So while the left team has a pretty easy time with the room they're in, the right team needs to go about things with a little more caution. I try to reach the door with Leone while striding everyone in to kill everyone as fast as possible, but sadly the one turn thing holds me back. So I spend precious turns backing my units up so that Leone can open the door, and then get out of range of the Cavalier. Now Lysithea just needs to dodge an arrow, and with a rally speed from Ignatz, she can kill the archer on the next player phase. and I put a speed rallied Raphael just inside the first cavalier's range. With 9 protection and 39 HP, this is plenty for taking a single attack, though I was afraid Raphael would get attacked twice anyway. This was the point where I learned to prevent enemies with Canto from cantoing. By simply repeating this principle with the next cavalier, I'm able to secure the lever room. While Shamir cheeses the Death Knight's room, Lawrence very easily grabs the Levin sword. The March Ring proves to be a little bit trickier. Lysithea misses an attack and immediately puts herself in mortal danger. Because I used almost all of my pulses in the lever room, I try to have Ignat stop things from getting worse, but it only causes him to potentially die in the next enemy phase. So I had to send Shamir through a warp tile just to shoot the knight from a great distance. Got the March Ring. Now I can just kill the last enemy in the Death Knight's room without even opening the door, and this chapter is done in 18 turns. So Flayn is rescued. Sedith hasn't been this happy since his last book burning. Oh yeah, and Monica's back, but sadly she has to redo her freshman year.
Don't get me wrong, I have no intention of dying.
Geez, Dad, can you knock on wood or something? Now for Chapter 7. One of the things I want to get out of the way now is getting Rhea's sea support so that I can have access to a Prologue in Part 2. I also want to win Flayn's fishing contest, and I get the correct fish on the first try, which is good because fishing is easily the most boring part of this game. For training goals, mainly I want to get Lysithea to be in reason for Funny Spike's Tau so that she can death the Death Knight. I also want to qualify my main player phase attackers for Brigand soon so they can learn Deathblow. And I'm starting to prepare Balthus for some time as an armored class. I also start unlocking budding talents for Lysithea, Marianne, and Ignatz. Ignatz gets Seal Strength, which is really useful. Lysithea and Marianne get combat arts, which I thought might come in handy in case they run out of spells, but I never used these combat arts in the entire run, so yeah. The Golden Deer starts to get Prologue access in Chapter 7, so I want to knock out a couple of these as soon as possible. The first one I do is Land of the Golden Deer, which is Lawrence's Prologue. There are too many enemies on this map, so at the risk of missing some loot, I simply rally Violet's strength and speed, and warp her off to beat up the Weathervane in one turn. Versus obtained, for Lysithea, of course. Mostly. I also want to knock out some of the quest battles for the extra renown and due to a strange compulsion to clear my quest journal.
I like working. Feels real good to be needed.
Rhea, let this boy have a childhood, or I'm gonna do something drastic. With a month mostly out of the way, I promote Lawrence and Raphael to Armored Knight and get ready for a pleasant trip to Gronder Field. For the battle, the only interesting preparation I make is that I ask Petra for mission assistance so I can fight her slightly weaker generic replacement instead of her. There really isn't anything that useful in the store that we don't already have, and I've forged my weapons to an acceptable point, so let's just jump right in.
As long as we can pull off the win, doesn't matter how.
Funny you should bring that up, Claude. My underhanded tactic for this battle is to make sure I have my hand on the scale at all times. Since the Black Eagles start with the advantage of preventing me from moving without getting hurt, Violet swoops in to beat up the first Cavalier, then Canto's almost out of range. But Marianne can draw her back to get her out completely. My other units just want to go left. They can get in a good position to swoop down on Edelgard while her forces are fighting Dimitri in the bottom center of the map. Then Violet gets her strength and speed rally and gets warped south to deal with another Cavalier, only to Canto back and get drawn back again out of range. This lets Bernadetta focus on shooting the Kingdom people, and most importantly, prevents Ferdinand from murdering Violet. By hiding in the forest, my best tanks are able to pull the enemy Pegasus Knights somewhat safely. Unfortunately, the Blue Lions do manage to capture the central hill and get their first stat bonus. So after dealing with the Pegasi I pulled in the last turn, Violet crushes Ingrid, then uses Assembly on Ferdinand to set him up for Ferdinand von Fire. Because the Black Eagles are pretty much doomed at this point, I have Lysithea draw back Violet twice to the east so that she can swoop in on Annette and Generic Guy, who have both wandered northward. My other units emerge from their hiding spot in the forest to prepare to march down the center of the map. Because Edelgard can one-shot almost all of my units, I have Violet do a little hit and run on her while backing up to just outside of her range, anticipating that she'll use both of her next turns to move forward. I use one unit as bait to make sure she gets in as close as possible. With Edelgard cut off from Linhardt, Lysithea burns Edelgard a bit, Leonie gets a break shot in to reduce her defense, then Lawrence moves in to show her the power of nobility. Raphael pops a stride to make defeating Linhardt go a little faster, and it's time to pull Dimitri out of his hiding spot, relying on a lucky dodge from Byleth. After getting the Killer Lance from the chests, it's just a matter of dogpiling Dimitri after landing a break shot to make my life easier. With his defeat and having gotten enough enemies to earn the Blessed Lance, the battle is over in 11 turns. Chapter 8. Sedith informs us that Ramire Village is slightly on fire, and since the church didn't set it on fire, we should probably go put it out. While looking through the library, Claude finds a picture of the Immaculate One taped to the door to Tomas's office, with some darts sticking out of it. Seth takes the picture and definitely doesn't burn it, wink. My training focus this month is to get people's authority up. Everyone basically has the skills they need for now, but they could use some new battalions. Leone gets the one that gives Impregnable Wall, which is going to have its uses throughout the run. For example, in this rare monster battle filled with Cavaliers, Lawrence is able to tank a wave of cantoing Cavaliers in a situation where anyone else would have died. Hilda waves a hand over a horse's butt to increase her riding skill. Movement +1 will be handy for her. I do the trading quest to give the two-toned whetstone to Shamir. She's actually going to be a main member of the team, and getting a free silver bow at this point in the game is just too nice to pass up. I also want to get some paralogs done. Sword and Shield of Saros, which is the Aloe Shamir paralog, is easy. I rally Byleth's speed, stride her, and send her off with the Thunderbrand in the boss's general direction. That gets us the large bullion and the Seraph robe in one turn. Then there's the one where monsters trap Byleth and Xanadu. This one's a bit trickier, though honestly it was easier than I expected it to be. My students are good enough with battalions at this point to hit monsters reliably, so finishing them off one at a time is a piece of cake. By putting Byleth over this cliff in the top left corner, the wolves aren't really sure what to do. This one weird trick gives my students plenty of time to catch up with her. I get the last monster on the north side of the map down really low, then pull almost everyone east. This lets me mostly avoid the reinforcements when I do kill the monster. Then Marianne does a stride which helps my units push south, then shoot down any birds that get in the way, and focus on the boss. On turn 7, Lawrence takes down the beast with a mighty blow. It's hard to say whether the Knowledge Gem or the 3 extra Divine Pulses is the better reason to do this paralog as soon as possible, but I got them both anyway. After promoting Sylvain to Archer and hearing him talk to women like he's writing a soon-to-be downvoted comment in a cosplay thread on the Fire Emblem subreddit, it's time to head into battle. Overall, this battle is pretty straightforward in a normal playthrough, and in Old Twin Crests mode it's not that complicated either. One team, led by Byleth, goes left. Byleth grabs the giant shell, Sylvain takes out the guys near the spawn point, and Lysithea saves the first villager with a long-distance dark spikes. The right team wants to take out an attacker on turn 1 and save the second green unit, and then push south quickly. Enemy villagers are extremely weak stat-wise and serve as pinatas full of experience points for my units. Then Tomas reveals himself to be Solon, the evil guy. Physiognomy, the lazy writer's friend. Speaking of lazy writing, look who's back. Eat spikes. Solon's AI doesn't really know what to do with 2 turns. After saving the final villager and looting the Horse Slayer, we can start wrapping things up. So on turn 4, after letting my units randomly hit some enemies for a little extra skill experience, I have Byleth fight Solon with Thunderbrand and win. Oh yeah, the Flame Emperor is in this game.
May the goddess Sothis protect you.
Hey, that's the name of the voice in my head. Chapter 9. As I mentioned way back, I want Hilda to be my dancer for this run. Thanks to her level ups as an adjutant, she has more than enough charm after dance practice to win the contest. I want to get all the usual stuff out of the way on the first week of exploring because I plan on doing a lot of paralogs. This includes fishing, since it's fistfuls of fish, and basically I'll never have to fish again after this, except for one special fish in particular. As far as training goes, I finally get Seal Strength on Ignatz, which is great. I also want Leone to start learning riding, though she won't be in a mounted class for quite a while. Getting Byleth to be a brigand is not a bad idea either. Now it's time to do 4 paralogs. Number 1. A gamer has taken over Felix's dad's hometown, so we have to kill him. Not a problem. However, this map is notorious for Rodrigue dying quickly, and I'm not going to take a bet on his chances in Twin Crests mode. I start off by having Marianne stride Lysithea, then use her second turn to stride Flayn, who rescues Lysithea leftward slightly. Raphael, Ignatz, and Balthus all shove Lysithea leftward. This gives Lysithea just enough space for 2 turns worth of movement to reach the boss with Thyrsus, who she can one-shot as long as the Crest of Gloucester activates. And that's done in 1 turn. Aegis Shield and extra large bullion obtained. Number 2. Lawrence's dad is a bad person, and Raphael and Ignatz want to kill his employees. Marianne strides Lysithea, Byleth clears a path through the little forest tile to the east, and Lysithea swoops in and dark spikes the boss. 1 turn, and we got all the rewards. Brief intermission for the dance contest. We have a dancer now. Considering that our dancer can act twice, we can theoretically have a unit act 6 times in 1 turn. Not broken at all, I assure you. And since Lysithea hit level 20 in the last battle, I promote her to Warlock. Paralog number 3. Manuela's severe head injuries from Chapter 6 caused her to enter a fugue state and wander into a bandit camp. Marianne starts off by striding everyone, and tag teams a Swordmaster with Hanneman. By placing Marianne and Hanneman in this way, Flame can go next to them both and rescue Lysithea in a way that assures she will teleport to the north. Then Ignatz rallies speed for Byleth and Lysithea. Lysithea carves a path forward through a grappler, and kills the guy holding the experience gem. That lets Byleth fly up and kill the boss. Yeah, one turn again. Prologue 4, the Fladen set of the Prologue. Unfortunately, this can't be one turned because it's a route map on rough terrain. I wish there was anything interesting to say about this map, but there really isn't. You just move forward, kill enemies, move forward some more, kill more enemies, and so on, until Seth's bloodlust is sated. I managed to do it in 9 turns and got the Spear of Assault, which is what I came here for, really. On the plus side, Byleth manages to pass the Wyvern Rider test with only a 51% chance to pass. But oh no, Alois says there are monsters nearby.
Damn it! I wanted to talk to you about something important, but there's no time. There's never any damn time.
Don't worry, Dad, I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk after the battle. The goal of the battle is to just kill all the monsters, but if we save the students, we also get an energy drop. To start things off, I have Leone make Lorenz and Balthus impregnable so they can clog up the middle path. I gave Sylvain the Alliance Veteran Duelists, which lets him use the Absorption Gambit. I don't care that much about the healing, but I do like that it hits a nice big area, which is great for breaking down monster barriers. With the help of Byleth and a dance from Hilda, Sylvain's able to break the leftmost monster's barrier, allowing Lysithea and Sylvain to easily work together on killing it. That's one student saved. Byleth moves up to prevent the next monster from moving south, while the rest of my units whittle down the one that Lorenz and Balthus have pinned. For turn 2, Claude and Balthus work together to stun the middle monster, and Claude swings around to hit the one on the right, with Fusillade coming in particularly handy here. Actually, plus sign shaped gambits in general, since you only need 2 to stun a typical monster. Thanks, Ignatz. After Byleth uses Assembly on the leftmost monster, then hits it with her sword, yet another monster is stunned. The running theme of this battle so far is that Twin Crests gives me a massive advantage thanks to being able to strike first, and nullify the enemy unit's turns with gambit spam. A well-placed stride lets my units rush north to handle the last 2 monsters in much the same way, and all of them are dead in 4 turns. So, is this a bad time to ask what you wanted to talk about, Dad? Chapter 10. I wish I could pawn this ring because I do not plan on using it. As far as training goes, it's really not that complicated right now. Units need to hit level 20 to promote to an advanced class more than they actually need skill experience, so I mostly train authority or start training skills they'll need for master classes, or those actually going into one. Wow, St. Sarah's Day and Rhea's birthday are the same day, what a coincidence. After celebrating that, I make Marianne a bishop and do some auxiliary battles for monster materials. On week 3, I explore the monastery for the Fish of Mystery event. But after trying dozens of times, it never bites, and I don't bother reloading. On the week before the mission, I do 2 Prologues. The first one is Sylvain's. You might be wondering, hey, Zetetic, didn't you already clear this town of thieves when you did Felix's Prologue? Yes, Timmy, but they're back now, because the kingdom has basically no control over its own territory. Basically, this map plays the same as it does normally. Go around the edges of the map taking strongholds without aggroing the thieves in the middle. Once all the strongholds are taken, just wipe out the last few enemies and you're done. Good job, team. The next Prologue I do is for Balthus. To beat that, just have Balthus punch someone so hard the game crashes. Nah, just kidding, you can't beat a Prologue like that, you'll just lose all your progress. What you should do instead is learn where to move your units and where not to move your units to avoid spawning reinforcements too early. To do this, simply look up a guide on the internet. Most of the Prologues in this game are fun, but this one just involves units clearing their starting areas, standing at the edge of the spawn zones until turn 5, fighting off the extra enemies, and then converging on the center. It's really not that difficult to muster my units in the central plaza for one last push against the boss, who dies, and then dies as a monster, and then drops the Vajramushti. Yay. The only thing that Twin Crests changed in those battles is it made them require a bit more efficiency in getting rid of everyone. Now with all that out of the way, a real enemy has been spotted in this healed forest. It's time for some tactical revenge. At this point, most of my physical attackers have Death Blow, but I give the T Battalion from a DLC quest to Lawrence, of course, to give my units more strength when needed. My turn 1 opening move for this battle is a good old stride, followed by a battleground cleanup, which is another DLC gambit. It's nice because it hits a 3x2 rectangular area, and it's just another great monster killing battalion since it cracks 3 barriers which go down in 3 attacks. That way we don't have to mess with hitting the monster with lances, since we only have so many good lance users. Claude barrels forward with his second turn to rattle 3 enemies with a Fusillade, Balthus punches the beast to death, and Lorenz, Leone, and Lysithea work together to eliminate the nearby cavaliers. After silencing the nearby mage, Marianne gets on healing duty. Byleth gets rid of one of the rattled archers. Since we provoked and or killed a lot of enemies that turn, everyone is moving, but the only enemy that can actually reach anyone is this brave cavalier that would have killed Lysithea if she didn't get Pavise from Thyrsis. On turn 2, I set up an impregnable wall to pull the charging enemies into. Basically, I want to deal with everyone except Cronia first. For turn 3, Claude bonks a monster with Fusillade. Ignatz is mostly here for the utility of Break Shot and Seal Strength, but the extra might from the linked attack bonus with Adjutant Raphael is handy here, because it sometimes means the difference between doing 0 damage and doing at least 1 damage. I try to put Byleth here to bait the clown, but then she crits Byleth and kills her, so we have to go about this another way. So instead, I have Byleth fly back to the big old ball of death to help out with the monsters. Once the last charging monster dies to the golden deer dog pile, I have Leone put impregnable wall on Byleth, who proceeds to fly to the northwest part of Cronia's range. As expected, Cronia takes the bait, then goes after Leone. At this point, we only need a miasma and a curved shot from Claude to take her out. Well, I guess Solon takes her out, but, you know, details. And Byleth goes to Teacher Hell, infinite days on lunch supervision duty. Nah, screw this. Hire an aide for this, you cheap bastards. The next couple of turns are spent clearing out the local fauna. Thanks to Lawrence's battlefield tea time, our units have a pretty easy time dealing with the monsters and some of the other enemies surrounding them. I don't want to linger too long though, so I have Byleth fly over to Solon and beat him up. All done in 8 turns, and Rhea is as happy as a kid who won first prize at the science fair. Probably because she kinda did. Chapter 11. Rhea tells Byleth that she must go to the Holy Tomb to download a copy of Fire Emblem Fate's Revelation from the Goddess. Rhea would do it herself, but the last time she tried, Nintendo sicked a SWAT team on her. My goal for Lawrence to learn Pavise before Chapter 13 is progressing at a good pace. Unfortunately, not everyone is ready for greatness by week 1. I go down into Abyss to recruit Yuri to unlock his Prologue real quick, and I catch Alois looting my dad's stuff. I appreciate his initiative though, so I recruit him. He's gonna end up being a guard adjutant for Leone. After getting all of my students' motivation and support points up through meals, I have an abundance of activity points that I spend on faculty training to get Byleth's lance rank up, since I want her to qualify for Falcon Knight at some point. For training, I wanted Ignatz to get a B in Sword so he can pass the Assassin test, but he passes just fine on week 2 without reaching B. Alois already starts with the skills for Armor Knight, and Catherine finally qualifies as well after months of having her goals set to Axe and Heavy Armor. With Felix already a grappler, I have all 3 of my main guard adjutants now. Next up, Paralogue time. Yuri's Paralogue involves saving Duke Gert from enemies that turn into monsters when they get near him, which is especially fun in Twin Crests mode. So the battle starts off with, you guessed it, a stride from Marianne. Lysithea wipes out 2 of the enemies close to the starting position, then Byleth gets the last enemy nearby and starts killing her way to Gert. Claude fusillades the next trio of enemies just to stop them from being annoying on enemy phase, and the rest of my units start going up the narrow corridor on the center right of the map. By killing enemies named Thief, I can ensure they don't turn into monsters later on in the battle. Unfortunately, some of the thieves are just too far away and reach Gert on turn 1, so now there are just 2 beasts we have to deal with. Now, if I move within 2 spaces of Gert, reinforcements will spawn, so I want to avoid that. Instead, Byleth uses Assembly on both of the beasts to attract their attention to her. Claude's Monster Blast combat art is especially useful since it breaks a full barrier tile. By the end of turn 2, I'm able to defeat one of the beasts, and on turn 3, I get the other one and start preparing my units to go east. There's still some thieves running towards Gert, but they're pretty easy to take out. While Byleth starts to take out the enemies standing in the top right corner of the map for no discernible reason, my students start to push south toward Mycen. Not Mycen who is cool, but Mycen who lives in a basement and rambles about beasts. We're able to defeat him and his little posse pretty easily, but it also triggers reinforcements. And Duke Gert is still in the northern part of the map, having spent the last few turns chasing around Byleth. So, yeah, he gets vaporized by Cavaliers. So I wait for Gert to get closer and defeat Mycen again, and now everyone's in a somewhat better position to handle the reinforcements. After a little bit of cleaning house, this battle is done in 10 turns. Now we have the Fetters of Dromi, or more accurately, Hilda has them. Canto and +1 movement on a dancer that can dance twice? Yes, please. After doing an auxiliary battle, I make Leone a paladin and Sylvain a cavalier. Next up, the Catherine Paralogue. Playing this map on Twin Crests mode is interesting, to say the least. Since you're facing a lot of enemies with 6 or 7 movements that can act twice, on an incredibly small map, there's pretty much no way to avoid being attacked. I can pull some of them away from the center by having Byleth act as bait, but then this map starts to feel like Battleship. Enemies have moved around in the fog, and you basically have to get lucky to reveal them, and lucky again to successfully attack them. After a while, it's easier to just abandon Rhea for a bit while my units do some headhunting in other parts of the map. It's a lot of trial and error. Mostly error, though, really. Until Byleth is able to hunt down the last enemy. Rhea gives us the Shoes of the Wind, which will go to Byleth. I decide to do an auxiliary battle before promoting Balthus to Fortress Knight. Byleth finally gets to sit down and try to find a Revelation ROM for Rhea, but unfortunately Nintendo tipped off the FBI. The students let Byleth know that she should have used a proxy, which brings us to this video's sponsor, Lawrence VPN. Have you ever been on YouTube and saw a video that was not available to commoners? But with Lawrence VPN, you can trick YouTube into thinking you're a noble, so you can watch whatever the hell you want. Don't settle for less. Grab a cup of tea and watch what Lawrence watches with Lawrence VPN. Oh yeah, the battle. Stopping the thieves is kinda hard when they can move twice, so after getting into random fights for experience points, I tried Lysithea and Hilda, use Lysithea's 2 turns to approach the Flame Emperor and fight her with Miasma, and then have Hilda dance for Lysithea, and finally, she blasts the Flame Emperor's mask off. All in 1 turn, of course. Edelgard declares war on the Church of Seros. We should probably have a team huddle about this. Chapter 12. Rhea admits to doing a slight amount of unethical human experimentation. To prepare for battle with the Empire, I do the Proper Conduct tournament, which is a DLC quest that throws Byleth in the arena. And I get a Brave Lance from it, which I think is neat. Since this is the last chapter of Part 1, I decided to throw the students in other houses a bone and see if they want to join my class. It'll make future battles slightly easier and also allow me to avoid killing children. I managed to convince Dorothea, Ash, and Ingrid to join up. They'll mostly sit on the roster doing nothing, but hey. During training, I make sure to finish up the last bit of tutoring that Raphael needs to become a Fortress Knight, and go into auxiliary battles. I want to make sure Claude finally gets hit plus 20, and Lawrence learns Provise. By mission day, Claude is ready to become a Wyvern Rider, and Lawrence can finally become a Cavalier, though he's going to stay in Fortress Knight for now. Before the battle, it's important to note that technically I'm preparing for 2 battles. This battle, and the next chapter's battle, which we jump right into after this one. I want Lawrence to have Provise specifically so that he has the greatest chance of surviving the turn he spawns into the next battle, with Assassin Ignatz at his side to avoid getting attacked as much thanks to stealth. I also want to distribute all the stat boosters I've been hoarding. Lawrence gets all the dexterity boosters, getting him to 21 dexterity. This means a 21% chance to trigger Provise, which checks twice if he's holding Thyrsus, as well as an extra 6 damage with Frozen Lance. He also gets all of my defense, resistance, and HP boosters. Marianne gets 5 extra luck, or in other words, 5% greater chance to trigger Miracle. Wow. I finally get around to giving Byleth the Shoes of the Wind. I give Lysithea 3 extra magic. Not much, but she's already pretty good. Leonie gets a bunch more strength, and Claude gets some speed. I get Ignatz a little more charm, though it doesn't really help. Now for the battle itself. Claude has more than enough might to start things off by shooting down the 2 Pegasi near the starting line. Although Claude will automatically become a flying class next chapter, having him as a Wyvern Rider now really helps a lot with being able to canto back after the second fight and stay out of trouble. Raphael is able to choke the passageway and use Helm Splitter with a hammer to get rid of the Armored Knight. Shamir and Lysithea, with the help of Dancing Hilda, are able to clear the rest of the enemies out of this little area. Thanks to Hilda's fetters, Lysithea can range out a little further and get danced so that both of them can go back behind Raphael again. After that, Byleth kills an archer and then assemblies Ladislava, because if she can move on turn 1, someone is pretty much dead. Despite fighting against Lancebreaker, Leonie's able to kill the warrior close to us on the left. On enemy phase, Raphael easily tanks the Death Knights as long as he doesn't get crit, and Leonie takes a monster hit like a champ. The remaining flyers are annoying, though not as bad now that there's less of them. They're definitely not as annoying as all the healers on this map who love to spam Physic.
I'm grateful. Appreciate it.
My compliment. You're a natural.
Next goal for the left side is to clean up some of these monsters. Lawrence and Leonie stun the first one, so that's neat. Claude runs the same scheme on 2 more Pegasus Knights. Ignatz sets Ladislava up with a break shot, and Byleth knocks her down with a cool sword. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? And Leonie and Sylvain are able to stun the second monster. Once the green units start putting in some work, you know the hard part of the battle's over. On turn 3, it's time to clean up the monsters for good. As I bring the units on the right to the center, I also end Claude's second turn without doing anything, just so Hilda can dance for him, and he just does the same thing he always does to 2 more Pegasus Knights. Turn 4, Sylvain one-shots Hubert with the Lance of Ruin, and that's both strongholds taken. Leonie prepares Lawrence and Sylvain to tank another monster. Those three have everything handled on that side, so let's just focus on the units marching down the center to take out Randolph. Once that's somewhat easily done, Edelgard is next. But Hilda needs to fix this line a bit because Edelgard is going to charge, and Lysithea is in range of her second move. Once that's done, Edelgard gets baited by a green unit, which leaves her open to attack on turn 5. Byleth whittles her down a bit, Raphael and Shamir set her up even more, and Ignatz finishes her off for the experience points. Part 1 is complete, but sadly, we're in the storyline of 3 houses, and so, even when we win, we lose. After 5 years in some random hole near Garrick Mach, it was time to go home. Everything I've done up until this point in terms of training and preparations has been to make sure that every one of my units can survive this battle. That's not an exaggeration. Even so, finding the correct moves is still difficult. I do try to see what I can get away with, some risky plays that might pay off if Byleth can just dodge an attack, but it doesn't really work out, so I need to find something a bit more reliable. I decide on Byleth and Claude clearing out the initial group of enemies while just staying out of range by the time enemy phase rolls around. Then on turn 2, I do a hit and run with Byleth and pull her and Claude back to where Lawrence and Ignatz will eventually show up along with Hilda and Leonie. Ignatz with Seal Strength and Break Shot makes a great companion for Lawrence, who faces low or sometimes 0 damage against many enemies here. Leonie's strength is just slightly too low to one-shot enemies, so she has to make do with using both of her turns to attack the same enemy. And she cantos back, Hilda dances her, and Leonie just rinses and repeats. And since Hilda can dance twice, of course, rinse and repeat again. The +4 speed boost from Special Dance also helps a bit here with making the difference between doubling and not doubling. The enemy AI is pretty inept here. Linked AI is usually scary in Fire Emblem games, but in 3 houses it usually just means enemies group up into ideal formations for your gambits to just wreak havoc. The enemies on the south side of the map are a bit too sparse for that, but Leonie doesn't care. She clears them all out easily with Hilda's help. Next, Raphael, Lysithea, and Marianne show up. I let Lysithea keep Thyrsus in the last battle so that she can nuke the nearby archer. I said, so she can nuke the nearby archer. Thank you. And even Marianne's able to help a little with the Caduceus staff. I'm not in a rush to break down the walls here just yet, though. Eventually, Claude finds another group just asking to be ashes and dusted, and while the mages clear out the top right corner, Leonie and Hilda link up with the northwest group. The next few turns are spent systematically going around the map to clear out enemies and grab treasure, and keeping to the theme of abusing linked AI, Claude shoots one of Pallardo's crew to get them all to run away from the boss they're protecting. Then Byleth and Lawrence deal with them all. Next, it's time to get rid of Pallardo. You picked the wrong house, fool. But that wasn't the real Pallardo. What a twist. That dastard. He's so powerful he managed to convince someone to be his body double. Doesn't matter. Ignatz hits him with poisoned arrows, and on the next turn, a couple of break shots take him down. All wrapped up in 10 turns. The students all agree to fight the Empire, and the Church joins in too. Chapter 14. Claude uses organized religion the way it was designed to be used, to justify war goals. Lysithea is ready to promote to Gramarye, so I let her do that. Of course, classes can only have 3 skills, so to make room for twin crests, I had to make some decisions, by trying to get rid of skills that are the least useful to enemy units. In the Gramarye's case, I got rid of dark magic uses ×2, which hurts Lysithea somewhat, but I have faith she'll manage. So after unlocking just about everyone's A support, I do the usual stuff at the monastery. For training, there are still a few late game class goals I want to reach. I want Lawrence to become a paladin soon to learn Aegis and become the ultimate tank god. Raphael is going to be a great knight for my own personal amusement. Marianne wants to get her reason rank up for a better shot at passing the Gramarye test, and I want to push Balthus toward War Master. There are also some skill thresholds I want to hit for combat arts and abilities. I want Leonie to get point-blank volley and eventually become a bow knight. Though it's a long shot, I want Ignatz to get rally strength. Hilda still needs to unlock bolting and movement +1, and Sylvain wants to pick up swift strikes. So that's a few weeks of repeatedly exploring the monastery to boost motivation. Some efforts succeed, and Lawrence immediately shifts goals towards becoming a Dark Knight, but other students need a little more time to cook before they're ready. So after doing a couple of quest battles and watching Claude's presentation on our new brand logo, it's time to prepare for battle. Before the battle starts, I hire the Golden Deer Wyvern Company for Byleth. Although assembly has been useful for moving enemies around on occasion, Assault Troop hits more enemies, and I need that more for this battle. The start of this battle is a bit tricky because there are several high movement enemies near the starting location that can easily reach the back line and cause a game over, so turn 1 is dedicated to getting rid of as many of these units as possible. My low brain power strategy involves sending Lysithea west to kill paladins, then Claude flies off to save Lysithea from the enemy Pegasus Knight. Leone takes down the middle Pegasus, and Lawrence locks out a paladin. Byleth gets rid of the first 2 enemies on the right using a mace and a tomahawk, with Marianne and Hilda serving as kind of a pit crew to heal Byleth and give her an extra turn. She uses that to assault troop the next 2 enemies on the right to start clearing the way forward. Byleth's 5th and 6th attack on turn 1 involve beating up the units she just rattled. After my units fan out and start harassing some of the nearby enemy troops, one of the top 10 green units in Fire Emblem appears. This guy must not only be protected, he must be cherished. For the purposes of this video, his name is Blaine. The enemies that can actually reach the back line are gone now, so while most of my units just work on trimming back the enemies in the middle of the map, I send Byleth south so we can gambit some more enemies. Marianne strides Blaine to get him through the forest more quickly, who proceeds to approach his destination. On the next turn, Marianne, with the help of Hilda, makes sure that Blaine can do his thing during his next turn. Marianne also works with Byleth to take down the Pegasus Knights and make the right side of the map completely safe. My other units work on clearing the battlefield as best they can, but there's only so much I can do without being reckless. So I just Divine Pulse back and have Lysithea warp Claude forward so that he can fight for the Brave Lance and the Goddess Ring before pulling back. And with that, Blaine goes down into Abyss to find the pile of books Sedith has confiscated over the past 5 years and sets it on fire, which explodes the ground. Wait, I forgot to recruit Constance and Happy. Well, fire attack, yay, we're winning! With every enemy rattles for a turn, they're easy pickings for my units. Realistically, the only thing left in the way is Randolph. After Shamir finally gets hit plus 20, I have Sylvain finish Randolph for the experience points. And we're all done in 6 turns. Chapter 15. Raphael is hungry. This is a national disaster. Fortunately, this time I'm able to catch the Goddess Messenger, who appears to be from the same country that all the cool people are from. Wow, this cat thinks he's too good for my fish. What a jerk. Ah well, I'll save it for a meal in the final chapter, I guess. During training, Hilda acquires Bolting, which makes her the goddess of linked attacks, and Lawrence masters the fire spell. Good job, buddy, you're really helping. I also start working on getting my other unit's authority rank up. With a 73% chance to pass, Byleth becomes a Wyvern Lord on her second try, and Leone finally promotes to Bow Knight. There are 2 paralogs to do this month. First, the Hilda paralog. To start things off, I use the Hilda Leone trick to kill a monster nearby to the north. In the process, Leone learns Point Blank Volley. She gets danced again to eliminate a couple more enemies. Then from the opposite side of the map, Lysithea warps Sniper Shamir northward to shoot down some wyverns. The urgency here is because we need to save at least 1 green unit to avoid losing. Ideally, we'd save all of them, but these guys are not Blaine tier. The enemies are just too numerous for the soldiers to stand a chance. So, no Hexlock shields for me. Since this is a route map, and there's no special reward for saving just 2 or 3 of the soldiers, there's no incentive to do anything special here, and so I spend the next 2 turns routing the enemy. By turn 3, I get a large bullion and Frykugel for my troubles. Next up, the Marianne paralog. This one's easy, so I'll just gloss over it really quickly. We have so many tools at our disposal between top-notch weapons, excellent combat arts, and big gambits, that pushing everyone west through a mostly monster map is easy. Marianne stands around using physic and doing nothing else so she doesn't get attacked. By turn 6, my units have stunned and dogpiled the boss, and a crit from Claude finishes things up. Marianne gets Blutzgong, but more importantly she has enough skill experience to promote to Gremory. Now to go into ALL to pick up our groceries from Judith. In our way is Gwendol, who apparently wants to die. Well, he's in the right place. To start things off, I address the awkward Ash situation by flying Byleth off to beat him up with a brave axe of persuasion. Claude joins Byleth while the others go west, with the eventual plan to push north towards Gwendol. Combat arts like Point Blank Volley and Swift Strikes make quick work of high defense enemies that would otherwise require multiple units or a mage to kill. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do against critical hits, aside from being luckier or not putting Balthus in range, but rather than do something as sensible as that, I just warp Leone across the lava flow to take out the paladins. This is enough to get us to turn 2. Claude and Byleth's positioning have pulled several charging enemies. Good time for a not-so-secret scheme. Unfortunately, as I progress through the western part of the map, I completely forget to account for the ambush reinforcements. But if Bolothus can get hit by a random unlucky crit, so can the enemy. Marianne's Thoron crit saves her and Gwendol starts to charge. On turn 3, Byleth grabs the bolt axe, then flies back to her students to get a dance from Hilda. Byleth then flies behind Gwendol's group and assault troops them, before looting the silver shield. After playing with my food a bit, so to speak, by having my units get experience points by attacking random enemies, Lysithea blasts Gwendol away with the power of magic. The lamppost shield might prevent bonus damage to horses, but it doesn't fix the fact that Gwendol has 10 resistance. Unfortunately, I missed Judith and the items you can get by talking to her, but given how well I'm doing, I think I'll be fine without it. We got the food at least, so maybe Raphael will stop complaining about being hungry. Ah, who am I kidding? Chapter 16. Claude comes up with the plan of attacking the Great Bridge of Myrden. Hey, what did that bridge ever do to you? This is the chapter I max out my professor rank and now have way more activity points than I'll ever need. Nothing really special happens during instruction, so let's just jump into the Rhea Prologue. Rhea left us a treasure in the Holy Tomb, but she says there's a bit of a trap down there to prevent thieves from stealing it. Rhea, we really need to talk about what a bit means. I try to play this map straight by splitting my units into 2 groups going left and right, but there's a couple of problems. 1, enemies with bolting. I can only silence 2 enemies per turn with Marianne, but warlocks with bolting effectively threaten a 20-tile radius, and there's only so much I can do to make sure people survive that. The other issue is the enemy bow knights. These guys also effectively threaten 20 tiles, and I can't make everyone impregnable, so the easiest solution ends up being the 1-turn clear. Marianne strides several people, then Byleth and Claude fly out to defeat the first commander. Lysithea warps Leone halfway across the map. She uses her 2 turns to shoot one of the commanders and point-blank volley the other, which incidentally gets her movement +1. Then I warp Hilda over to dance for Leone, she fights the last 2 commanders, and we've wrapped things up in 1 turn. After spamming a bunch of auxiliary battles with the rest of my activity points, it's time to beat this bridge up. As I prepare for battle, I realize that I have a lot of money and nothing to really spend it on that I need. New battalions are nice, but not strictly necessary. New weapons are good, but I already have plenty. So most of my spending is on repairs. To start things off, my first turn involves moving my units as far as possible and attacking enemies that are in range. Violet's goal is only slightly different in that she's also grabbing all the loot. And as usual, I use gambits to lock enemies down and push my units as far as possible. I decide to just have Sylvain start triggering reinforcements. I don't expect them to be much trouble anyway, as you can see with Marianne dodging a lethal attack. On turn 2, my units make their way around the little fortress to stop the reinforcements by defeating its guards. With the Leone-Hilda trick, I'm able to use Leone's 6 attacks to defeat one of the guards and the 2 archers west of the fortress. During the enemy phase, Acheron appears, but since his forces aren't ambush spawns, it's really no big deal. When turn 3 comes around, he is easily, and thankfully, silenced by Shamir. My units make quick work of Acheron's goons as well. After Lysithea hits the first monster with some magic, the Hilda-Leone trick gets rid of the other 3 barrier tiles, in what is possibly the most useful example in this video of how overpowered my units are as they go into the late game. Some enemy reinforcements appear, but they aren't quite in range to attack anyone. Taking down the monster is trivial at this point, and my long-range attackers basically find this map to be a joke. I warp Claude close to Ladislava so that he can rattle her, and Canto back, giving my units even more room to safely move up. The enemies have nothing to do, so on the next turn Lysithea weakens Ladislava with Dark Spikes, and Ignatz hits her with a couple of break shots, killing her. Ferdinand wants to avenge Ladislava, so I move Claude north to Ashes and Dust the northern monster, and put Sylvain next to him. This is so Leone can ride up and impregnable wall both of them. Then Claude flies over the monster to block one bridge while Sylvain blocks the other, and Lawrence rides up to stun the monster for this turn. Now, the only enemies we have to worry about this turn can only hit Claude and Sylvain, but on enemy phase, Ferdinand doesn't even bother attacking, which is understandable. Shamir hits Ferdinand's group with a Fusillade, then Byleth sweeps in to hit him with a Brave Axe. Then, without even a hint of remorse, she goes and gambits the group led by the Alliance General. But after using the other enemies as experience pinatas, Ignatz moves in to finish off the boss. I didn't have to route this map, but I did it anyway in 6 turns. Chapter 17. It was Ferdinand's dying wish that this area be protected.
Even if I die, please, protect this area.
And so Claude wants to honor that wish by making sure all Empire territory is protected by the Alliance, starting with Gronder Field. Randomly, Claude becomes a Barbarossa because I guess he needs to promote sometime. I buy all of Anna's stat boosters because why not?
Is that the one? Is Is that the one? Is that the one?
Alright, that's why not. As is expected during an outbreak of total warfare, the capitalists have their priorities in order. After doing a couple of auxiliary battles to help my severely underleveled units catch up, I jump into the Claude Prologue. This is the last Prologue of the run, and it's certainly something. If you play the map too aggressively, things get very out of hand with the linked AI between the monsters and the warlocks, as well as the multiple cantoing flyers. Fortunately, there is a third army in this battle, thieves who have started scavenging the area before us. So on turn 1, I have Byleth kill a sniper threatening the deployment location to give all of my units a safe tile to sit on, and then end my turn. Letting the red and yellow units fight each other is fine by me, since I don't really care about the items the thieves drop. Then on turn 2, I simply end my turn without doing anything. The thieves win some and the phantoms win some. Most importantly to me, there are fewer enemies on the map. Of course, now the enemies have been triggered into being aggressive, and that does mean they start to attack me. My top priority on turn 3 is getting rid of the nearby wyverns and breaking the armor on the giant crawler. With the help of a dance, Claude uses ashes and dust on a nice group of enemies just begging to be rattled, but I decide to go back in time to save that gambit for various reasons. I end up not needing to rattle them anyway. By the end of turn 5, any enemy that has a realistic chance of opposing me is dead. There's a few scattered enemies here and there, and of course, the big guy. I spend a couple of turns getting my units in position for the final attack. To start off, Claude uses both of his gambits to break the Windcaller's armor. And that's all there is to it, really. In the following attacks, my units are able to eat through all of the boss's HP bars in one turn. As my reward, I get the Sword of Begalta, which I basically never use. Some other good things come out of the effort, though. Balthus earns the War Master promotion, and Raphael becomes a Great Knight. In this mod, War Masters drop Axe Fair for Twin Crests because so many other classes get it anyway. Let War Masters punch. Great Knights lose Lance Fair because who the heck wants to put lances on a Great Knight? Anyway, we're now ready for the disaster at Gronder Field. Edelgard promises a very chaotic battle, but this one actually ends up being pretty orderly. I get things started off by having Balthus clear a path down the middle for my units, but I only use it a little bit. After moving Balthus up for a little more fighting, I have Claude use Encloser on the nearby Paladin, because I don't want him to bother Balthus. Basically, my goal is not to take the center, but to clear the area around it. If I control the hill, a lot of units will come at me very fast, and I want to avoid that. I also move Lawrence and Sylvain to the left to deal with one of the paladins on the left side of the map, while Claude gets danced to handle another. Bernadetta shoots at Byleth and Balthus, and Lawrence handles the enemy phase acceptably, I guess. Fortunately, Claude's in the perfect position to fly down to Hubert on turn 2 and take him out with the Brave Bow. Now I start moving my units towards the top left corner of the map. Hubert's defeat causes Petra and some of the units linked to her to start charging. This also happens if Bernadetta is defeated, but at least in this scenario, the only fight my units get into on enemy phase is this one where a paladin hits Sylvain with a Horse Slayer. On turn 3, Claude flies in to shoot down a Pegasus Knight, but falls victim to the one-turn glitch. Leone shoots down the other Pegasus, and Lysithea warps Hilda over to dance for Claude. Since dodgy Petra decided to stand next to a not-so-dodgy monster, Claude rattles them both with his Gambit. Then he gets danced again to take out some random mage, and Gambit the Fortress Knight threatening Leone. Byleth then breaks the monster's armor, and I start to move my units south. Before the battle, I spent 10 Mithril to forge a Gradivis for Sylvain. It turns out to be pretty accurate against Petra. It's tied with the Sword of the Creator and the Mini-Bow for the most accurate 1-2 weapon in the game, and it ends up being pretty useful later on too. With no way to move on enemy phase, Petra attacks Leone, who has close counter, so that was silly. This sequence of events has triggered the Kingdom reinforcements to appear, who join the main army in charging toward the center of the map. In response, Edelgard sets Bernadetta on fire. On the next turn, after taking down the nearby monster, I get my units in position for Edelgard. On enemy phase, Bernadetta starts shooting people, while Dimitri Group goes north around the hill. Everyone else starts to dogpile Bernadetta, and she holds her own, at least for now. With paladins closing in on Lysithea, she uses Resonant Lightning to stop them in their tracks. It would be easy to kill them both with Dark Spikes, but she would need 2 turns for that. This Gambit takes 1 turn, which lets me use her other turn to have her retreat. I even draw her back more with Marianne just to make sure she's safe, in case any Kingdom Swordmasters or Paladins decide not to climb the hill. And then, because I'm extra paranoid about the AI doing weird stuff after counting tiles, I have Leone Impregnable Wall her, as well as Ignatz, who's been lagging behind also. As for Edelgard, I figured I'd have Byleth attack her with Thunderbrands because, although Edelgard can kill Teach in one hit, she only has a 12% chance to actually hit. But not only does Byleth land a crit with the Crest of Flames activation that prevents a counterattack, she lands a second crit and defeats Edelgard in one round. All these preparations for nothing. As I start to move my units towards the top center of the map to meet Dimitri, I watch as the Kingdom troops surround Bernadetta. She holds her own for a little while longer because of Vantage, but she eventually dies. So after Byleth grabs a lamppost shield, I put some units in position to fight Dimitri, but it turns out Swift strikes Sylvain with the Killer Lance ends that fight nice and quick too. It all took 6 turns and Mercedes didn't even die. Hilda explains that Dimitri died on the way back to his home planet, Lysithea explains the Slitherers, and Claude lets everyone go home for a bit. Now it's time for Chapter 18, The Golden Scheme, Sneaking into Fort Mercius. You might be wondering what new things a player does in the monastery and instruction period this late in the game. The answer is basically nothing. It's actually more useful to go into auxiliary battles just to master classes. But Sylvain does get movement +1, so that's neat. And Lawrence passes the Dark Knight exam with a 67% chance. Time to make him the best tank on the team. Okay, battle time. For this one, Claude starts alone, but Nadir and some other green units join him. They aren't going to do much though. I start off by having Byleth loot the Speedwing, and then use a Gambit to stop the nearby Paladin from moving. Claude uses Encloser to stop the other Paladin, and then takes out the Dark Mage sitting on a magic orb. Lysithea obliterates another Paladin, and we're pretty much done with that part of the map. The rest of my units will be going westward, taking out this Fortress Knight and then moving to this point around the corner at the first wall on the left, which is about halfway between the starting position and the Death Knight. Importantly, Leone one-shots the sniper on the ballista, and Lysithea gets a dance from Hilda to start hitting the nearby monster over the wall. On enemy phase, as expected, the monster attacks Balthus, and the Fortress Knights begin to advance, clogging the path between me and the Death Knight. This only ends up being a minor inconvenience. On turn 2, Byleth grabs the useful Aurora Shield, and then with the power of gambits, magic, arrows, and a little bit of punching, the main group takes down the monster. Then Lysithea works on clearing a path through the Fortress Knights, before warping Leone close to the Death Knight. She has a pretty good chance of defeating him in one round, but not just yet. First, I want to warp Balthus over to Caspar so I can kill him for his Brave Axe. Sorry, buddy, but I really want... okay then. I warp Sylvain over to kill Caspar, and then Leone deals with the Death Knight. All done in 2 turns, and I even spared Linhart, so at least he gets to go home. God damn it. Chapter 19. The gang prepares to go to Envar, and I definitely make sure to take preparations seriously. My main goal for this month is to get Dorothea to a C rank in bows. I wasn't paying too much attention to her goals, so she got to a B+ in swords, but I want to deploy her for this next chapter. So I give her a broken bow, then surround some poor priest with Nosferatu and heal, and just have Dorothea take 6 pot shots at him before ending my turn and repeating the process. All of this is so that Dorothea can promote into an assassin, so that she has stealth and 6 movement, which will make a side objective in the next battle a lot easier. And Byleth also becomes a Falcon Knight, mostly because the class gains more sword experience, and she's been using swords a lot more lately. And now for the battle itself. Since your units get split into 2 groups for this battle, I'm going to primarily focus on the main group that does all the heavy lifting. Lysithea immediately kicks things off by charging through Enbar's north gate to kill 1 paladin, and then dive into the alleyway on the west to take out another. Claude provides a bit of assistance to make the northwest corner of the city safe. With 2 wind sweeps and a forged cursed Ashia sword, Byleth has a very good chance of defeating the nearby Fortress Knight with a pair of crits, and only loses 10 HP in the process. Dorothea, Marianne, and Hilda just follow them. While all this is happening, the other team is basically just clearing out enemies that are near them, just to make their nearby area safe. I have no intentions of staying long enough to get treasure or experience on this map. 3 Falcon Knights appear on turn 3 that can easily kill my squishier units, so basically I have 3 turns to defeat both the Death Knight and Hubert. But that's a turn 3 problem. Turn 1's enemy phase goes without incident. Turn 2 is basically just a setup for turn 3. My main group starts to move up to clear out the enemies ahead. To address the giant bird in the room, Claude hits it with Ashes and Dust, and then he and Byleth work together to hit the rest of the cracked barrier tiles until it's stunned. That'll have to do for this turn. They both get dances so they can take out the nearby magic users. And make sure to group Claude, Byleth, and Hilda all together for the next turn. On turn 3, Dorothea goes to pick up the Opera Company volunteers, which is one of the most useful battalions in the game. Speaking of useful battalions, Marianne strides Hilda, Byleth, and Claude. Lysithea and Claude work together on killing the giant bird, and then Claude cantos towards Hubert. Claude shoots at Hubert with Failnaught. With only a 44% chance to hit, Claude hits 1 out of 2 attacks, which is great. Next up, Byleth softens the Death Knight up with a wind sweep, allowing Lysithea, for the last time, to death the Death Knight with Death Spike's death. Hilda dances for Byleth, Leonie does a little bit of RNG manipulation, and then Byleth flies into Hubert with the Grounder combat art for some extra hit rate. This kills the Hubert. All done in 3 turns, as Sothis intended. Now it's time to attack Edelgard's castle, but we're not alone. Dedue is here to, help. Chapter 20. We don't go back into the monastery, which is great. We just go right into Edelgard's castle. As far as preparations go, I give Raphael the Opera Company. Step 1 is getting past Petra, or more accurately, through her. She has 102 avoid, which is very funny. My best shot at defeating her is a point-blank volley with a killer bow, in the hopes that Leonie can crit her once and be done with it. Fortunately, that actually works. Sorry, Petra, but can I borrow your door key, please? Thanks. After killing everyone else in the foyer with relative ease, Hilda dances Raphael so that he can smite Shamir and Ignatz out of range of the guy on the ballista, since Edelgard's castle either doesn't have walls or it doesn't have a roof. Since all of my units are out of range, nothing happens on enemy phase. On turn 2, my units move southward to clear the enemies behind the starting position, so that my units can loot treasure. I don't really need this stuff, but I'm greedy, and I want stuff. All of my units are out of range again, so the only thing that happens after player phase is Dedue's appearance. On turn 3, Byleth, Lysithea, and Hilda work together to assume total control of the treasure room. Leonie goes to the southeastern room to kill some random person for a valuable talisman, and then some other person for a slightly more valuable door key. My other units then proceed to get in position south of the door to the throne room. Dedue serves as a useful distraction thanks to his massive amount of HP and high defense. He also has an elixir, so he'll be fine for a while. Probably. Turn 4. Byleth loots the treasure, and Lawrence has the honor of opening the door to the throne room. After having Claude rattle almost everyone that could possibly be a threat, it's also time to get Hilda back to the front lines. Sylvain breaks the monster's armor with a gambit. My other units proceed to heal Dedue or kill enemies that are near him, but sadly, there's only so much we can Dedue for Dedue. A Dark Bishop comes out of left field to hit Dedue with Death Gamma. If I hadn't spent time getting the treasure, I might have been able to save him, but you know what? I think Dedue would have wanted us to have silver gauntlets and an extra door key. Rest in peace, my friend. On turn 5, I have Leonie kill a bunch of people to level up, and get the special dance buff from Hilda. She performs somewhat well against Edelgard, with one catch. She has to dodge a 55% hit that can kill her. With Edelgard sufficiently weakened, Claude flies in to shoot her dead, and Byleth grabs the last bit of loot on this map, Edelgard's head. The last battle of the war is won in 5 turns. But we're not done yet. Hubert wrote a letter about the Slitherers and how we have to kill them all, and we break Rhea out of jail. Time to go back to Garrick Mach. Chapter 21. It's time to defeat the Slitherers. Rhea will accompany us to Shambhala. In celebration, I make Sacred Beast roast instead of Immortality stew. You know, to give the army some variety they haven't had before. In the last week of training for the month, Lysithea hits S+ in Reason. Fun fact, you can still train maxed out skills. Fix your game, Koei Tecmo. Also, Hilda finally gets movement +1. The group travels halfway across the continent to confront a group of people who live in a basement, are generally unpleasant, put RGB strip lights on everything they own, and are bigoted towards people from other civilizations. So basically, they're gamers. Having done a bunch of auxiliary battles in the past few weeks, I can finally forge the Mercurius and the Haute-Claire because why not? This is when we get introduced to the Titaness, which I can shut down, so let's do that, or else these things are going to get annoying. Basically, we have 3 units and 4 groups, starting in each of the map's 4 corners. I want to have the 2 groups on the left meet up, and the 2 groups on the right meet up. then have the two groups of 6 move to the center. So that starts with Sylvain clearing the way on the east. Lysithea and Lawrence share Thyrsus so that Lysithea can destroy a troublesome Bow Knight, and Lawrence can chip a very tanky Grappler. Then Byleth finishes him off. On the left side, Ignatz break shots an enemy so Raphael can kill him with a Hout's Claire and Wild Abandon combat art for exact damage. After Shamir and Claude make a path for Hilda, she dances for Shamir and Raphael so that he can open the door, and Shamir can start shooting into the next room. Claude, of course, ashes and dusts some enemies to make some headway. On enemy phase, the Viscum starts up, but in reality these things are never a problem. On turn 2, the left team finally makes its way in. The Titaness is weak to axes, so Raphael chops down some of its armor, and Ignatz ultimately stuns it. With the other enemies out of the way, and a dance from Hilda, Claude is able to ensure that the first Titaness is taken down. Also, the left team is completely safe for now. The right team begins to swarm their side of the base. Lysithea is able to warp Balthus in to cause some quick chaos, but unfortunately she needs to rely on the Crest of Gloucester activation to one-round some of these enemies. Everyone else clears the immediate group of enemies, but on enemy phase, the Titaness on the right gets angry at Marianne. Oh, not lethally so, at least. Turn 3. Ignatz opens the door to the Titaness control room, and Leone carves a path towards Bias. Leone kills her with a point-blank volley and stops future Titaness reinforcements, so that was quick. Claude's team now makes its way towards the center of the map. The right team kills an aggressive enemy over the wall and hits the Titaness with a lance weakness with, you guessed it, lance attacks, eventually stunning it. On turn 4, Lysithea defeats the other Titaness and then prepares to breach the Viscum facility on the next turn. Enemy phase passes without incident, so on turn 5, Lawrence opens the door, Balthus beats up all of the nerds inside, and Lysithea sucks Pittacus into a black hole. The Viscum is now disabled, but more importantly, an easy path to the central area of the map opens up for Violet's group. As for Claude's team, Shamir moves forward and kills Chylon. This doesn't deactivate anything. Poor guy was just standing in front of the door. Soon enough, they secure the center entirely. For turn 6, Ignatz opens the door to clear the way for Claude to ashes and dust most of the people in the room. After using Shamir and Ignatz to clear some enemies out of the way, Claude goes in to hit Talus down to 1 HP with a Brave Bow, and Byleth finishes him off with the Sword of the Creator. That was quick. Rhea eats a nuclear missile, Talus learns about building code the hard way, and Nemesis gets out of his box. I have a feeling that's gonna be a problem. Chapter 22. Rhea tells her story before she dies. Nemesis getting out of his box was indeed a problem, and Rhea admits to dabbling in just a little bit of open heart surgery without a license. To prepare for the final battle, I recruit Anna. I'm not going to use her, I just think recruiting a level 42 thief in the last chapter of the game is funny. I also make deified fish to boost everyone's dexterity, speed, and defense. It's the best meal I can make with the ingredients I have, and I decide not to have Byleth marry anyone she's known since they were a teenager. Time to go out there and kill some incredibly old zombies, and some of the smartest Agarthan soldiers who just drink poisonous swamp water and die. My first goal for this battle is to make a somewhat safe location. The most promising spot for that is the northwest corner of the map, and since we have to kill every last one of the 10 elites, we might as well start with Bladed. Most of the rest of my units diligently get to work on clearing the enemies to the north out. Anyone not needed for that particular task gets to work on killing enemies immediately to the east, or they head south to deny the enemy the nearby ballista. By the end of the player phase, we have a pretty safe-ish starting area, and my units hold their own easily enough on the enemy phase. The sad thing is that there are so many enemies with Physic and Fortify on this map, I will undo a lot of my work. So on turn 2, I make sure to finish any fights that I start, at least when I can. Claude shoots Goneril right in his pink head. Claude also helps with the Big Bird, and I send Shamir and a few others to defeat it. That being said, I want to make sure more of those don't show up, so this crew is headed to Odessa. Meanwhile, Raphael, Sylvain, and eventually Lawrence will go after Lamine to stop the bolting attacks and drain the swamp. I need a turn to get units into position, but on enemy phase, Gloucester nobly charges in. His aggressive AI was activated because he started healing. Yeah, it's just a 3 houses thing. So on turn 4, Lysithea nips whatever plan he had in the bud. Shamir gambits Odessa and then Hunter volleys him, which not only causes him to die of arrow poisoning, but also makes his friends leave the battlefield without a fight. On enemy phase, a paladin charging with Gautier, who I slightly aggroed with Claude, causes Lysithea to flirt with death. So on the next turn, I have Lysithea steal some HP, then Claude and Byleth ruin Gautier's plans. As the group that nailed Odessa prepares to head north, Leone makes sure to wish Daphne a good night. It's a bit difficult to use a dancer with 1 HP, but Balthus can smite her around. On the next turn, Claude converts Dominic from an overachiever to an underachiever. Then there's Lamine. She's sort of like a luxury car with a bunch of unnecessary and annoying features, specifically her relic, which gives her Pavise and Aegis. Somehow, with 42 dexterity, Aegis triggers every single time Claude and Raphael attack her. When she's finally down to 8 HP, I make sure Lawrence can do 16 damage just in case Aegis triggers again. And well, what do you know, it does. Please die, thank you. Lamine's death turns the swamp into a wasteland, which has the same movement penalties on cavalry, but at least it doesn't damage everyone who starts their turn on it. Meanwhile, as Balthus punches his way down the center of the map, Violet flies in to land on a stronghold and do a little dodge tanking. While Balthus takes Karen's two-toned whetstone and a distant Bower Kai, Violet faces 0 hit against those who attack her thanks to Alert Stance Plus. Some healer uses Fortify twice. Fortunately, the extra strength Balthus gets from being mortally wounded is enough to introduce Karen to a taste more bitter than blackest coffee. After killing the rest of the enemies that used to be around Lamine, I realize my miscolored Christmas calves are not going to have a good time if they keep pressing on alone, and so I pull them back along the wooden bridge to rejoin the main group. Baiting enemies to Byleth forces them to use their second turn to move west, where my units can kill them. The enemies that stay near Byleth are easily shot down by Claude. Now that most of the enemies have been baited west, it's time for Byleth to do something about the enemy healers. She gambits them and tries to chop one of them into teeny tiny little pieces, but miracle. At least the enemies that fell into my trap are easy to kill, and once those are dealt with, Claude can finish up what Byleth couldn't. On the next turn, Claude takes out an atomic physicist and ensures that Fraldarius dies like a true knight. After I've gathered my units together, more or less, I send Claude off to confront the grandfather of his grandfather of his grandfather, and so on. Unfortunately, Claude can't quite do it, so I employ the somewhat cheesy strat of using Claude's first turn to wait for Alert Stance Plus. And then I send him in with the Avoid buff. That's enough to dodge Ronald Regan's attack and turn his whole life upside down. With 10 out of 10 elites yeeted, I decide to just route the map entirely. Lysithea warps Hilda over to dance for Claude a couple of times so that he can wipe out the 3 ancient mages on the bottom right corner of the map. This is it, our final battle. I start things off by having Ignatz rally Leonie's strength, speed, and dexterity. The point-blank volley with a killer bow whittles Nemesis down to 77 HP because no crits. Violet's wind sweep with the Sublime Creator Sword actually does crit and gets Nemesis down to 56. Claude contributes exactly 1 hit with the Fail Not and misses the other shot. Finally, Lysithea hits Nemesis with Hades Omega, dealing more than enough damage to defeat Nemesis. And we're all done in 12 turns. Nemesis and Violet have a little duel, Claude shoots Nemesis epically through the arm, and this playthrough is officially over.
It's up to you now, Teach. As for my path...
And that's it. I had a lot of fun with this playthrough. I played Maddening Three Houses a lot in early 2020 with a lot of time to burn. I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking here, but the challenge of Maddening is mostly front-loaded. Once you get past the first 5 or 6 chapters, it's relatively smooth sailing, provided you're actually building your units well and such. With this playthrough, I felt the difficulty was distributed pretty much the same way, but the early game was a lot harder than vanilla, and the late game was a little easier, just because you have so many tools at your disposal on top of the advantage that you get from, being able to take 2 turns and go first. It was easier, but not easy, since there's still a lot of enemy stats to chew through, and the AI does get to move twice after all, so being careless can still lead to your death. The AI is pretty clueless though, and once you get used to how they move with twin crests, you can kind of run circles around them. A lot of the challenge from the late game came from planning around enemy movements, and dealing with enemies with Canto, and just self-imposed stuff like trying to finish maps quickly or using different strategies. Would I do a playthrough like this again? In another game, probably, yeah. A Thracia Overclocked playthrough would be fun, for example. I might do this again in 3 Houses, but only on my own time, and then just play other routes or something. Maybe Fire Emblem Engage will have a Twin Crest-like ability, who knows. Anyway, seeing that 3 Houses modding has taken off as well as it has, really has me excited for actual skilled modders who are more dedicated than me at making mods. Since, you know, I just made this for a video. If you want to play this yourself, though, the link is in the description. And if you do play it yourself, please tell me about your runs. I would love to hear about them. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.